Hello everyone, welcome to Tathastu. So here I am Rohit Narang and I will be taking a topic of discussion today, and this topic holds immense importance when it comes to the prelims examination. I have seen a lot of students in my experience that are getting confused while studying the suspension of fundamental rights or the effect of emergency on the fundamental rights. So here in this discussion I will be taking the two important topics, that is Article 358 and Article 359, and how they will be impacting the fundamental rights. So if we see the first article, that is Article 358, it is only applicable, yaad rakhna, it is only applicable in case of external emergency. It is only applicable in case of external emergency, or I can say when the emergency is imposed on two grounds, that is the either it can be war or it can be external aggression. These are two circumstances in which an emergency can be declared on the grounds of external emergency, grounds of external reasons. And in this case, under Article 358, there is no provision that it can be put into use under internal emergency. Yaad rakhna, it will not be applicable in case of internal emergency. I can put a cross over it. Now, if I talk about Article 359, it is applicable in both cases. Either it is an external emergency, that is war or external aggression, or it is under internal emergency. I can say internal emergency can be put on the grounds of armed rebellion. So the Article 359 is applicable in both the cases. Either it is external emergency or internal emergency, but Article 358 is only applicable in case of external emergency. It is not applicable in the case of internal emergency. Please remember this concept. Now, if I come to the next point and if I see the differences between 358 and 359, the second difference between 358 and 359 is with respect to how many of the fundamental rights are getting affected by the use of these articles. If I see Article 358, it is only the fundamental rights under Article 19 that are getting impacted. Under Article 19 that are getting impacted. That means there are 6 fundamental rights under Article 19 that are getting impacted by the application of Article 358. इसका मतलब क्या है? All those fundamental rights which are under Article 19 will be suspended. But if I talk about the Article 359, here there will be no direct suspension. Here what will happen? The enforcement of fundamental rights will be suspended. In Article 358, the suspension of fundamental rights was taking place, but in case of Article 359, the enforcement suspension will take place. What do you mean by this statement कि यहाँ पे सिर्फ suspension of fundamental rights है, यहाँ पे suspension of the enforcement of fundamental rights है. याद रखना, यहाँ पे when you have Article 19 getting suspended, इसका मतलब आपके पास 19 article है ही नहीं. There is no fundamental right under Article 19. But if we talk about here, यहाँ पे you do have a fundamental right under Article 19, but their enforcement stands suspended. That means you cannot go to court, you cannot go to judiciary for the enforcement of your fundamental right under Article 19. So this is how the difference between Article 358 and 359 holds. अगर मैं देखूं इन केस ऑफ आर्टिकल 359, द सस्पेंशन ऑफ एनफोर्समेंट, अभी मैंने आपको बताया, द सस्पेंशन ऑफ एनफोर्समेंट ऑफ ऑल फंडामेंटल राइट्स एक्सेप्ट आर्टिकल 20 एंड 21. ऑल ऑफ योर फंडामेंटल राइट्स, उनका एनफोर्समेंट विल बी सस्पेंडेड, बट एक्सेप्ट आर्टिकल 20 एंड 21. In case of Article 358, only Article 19 will be suspended. याद रखना, whenever this process Article 358 application take place, the process is fully automatic. The process is automatic. As soon as the emergency under external reasons are imposed and the Article 358 is applied, then we have the automatic suspension of fundamental rights under Article 19. But in case of Article 359, this is not an automatic process. What will happen, as soon as the emergency is imposed, you will have a separate presidential proclamation. You will have a separate presidential proclamation which will state how many fundamental rights are getting their enforcement suspended. How many fundamental rights are getting their enforcement suspended. मतलब 20 और 21 आर्टिकल को छोड़ के कितने फंडामेंटल राइट्स का एनफोर्समेंट सस्पेंड हुआ है, that will be written in the presidential proclamation. So I can say this is an automatic process and this is not an automatic process because it is a two-step process. The emergency imposition and the presidential proclamation mentioning how many of the fundamental rights getting their enforcement suspended, but except Article 20 and 21. Here, as soon as the emergency is imposed, the fundamental rights under Article 19 are automatically getting suspended. So from here, I will get one more fundamental difference between Article 358 and 359. I can say here there is no executive discretion. No executive discretion. मतलब यहाँ पे एग्जीक्यूटिव का अपना मर्जी नहीं चलेगा, बिकॉज अंडर आर्टिकल 358 इट इज एन ऑटोमेटिक प्रोसेस. यू डू नॉट नीड अ kind of permission from the union executive ki sir how many of the fundamental rights are need to be getting suspended, because it is an automatic process. So as soon as the emergency is imposed, the article 19 is automatically suspended. But here you do have the union discretion. Union executive discretion is here. Union executive discretion is here, because here the union executive will decide which fundamental rights are to be included in the presidential proclamation so that their enforcement can be suspended. याद रखना, here we do not have any kind of executive discretion, but in this case we do have a executive discretion on which fundamental rights to be included in the presidential proclamation. All right, so this is how the difference between the article 358 and 359 holds. मैं एक बार और रिवाइज करा देता हूं. 358 is applicable only in case of external emergency. It is not applicable in case of internal emergency, but article 359 is applicable both in external as well as internal emergency. If we see the next difference, here only article 19 is getting impacted. Here all the fundamental rights are getting impacted except articles 20 and 21. Here it is an automatic process because you do not need a separate proclamation to suspend the fundamental rights. The fundamental rights under article 19 are automatically getting suspended. But here it is not an automatic process, because as soon as the emergency is imposed, you will need a presidential proclamation that will mention how many of the fundamental rights are there in the proclamation, and for that fundamental rights their enforcement will be suspended. Like the fundamental rights are there, but you cannot go to the court for their enforcement, and in this case you cannot suspend the enforcement of article 20 and 21. This is the second fundamental difference between 358 and 359. Now if I see the third difference, there is executive discretion. There is no executive discretion. That means the executive is not independent to choose which fundamental rights are to be suspended, because as soon as the emergency is getting imposed, you are automatically suspending the fundamental rights under article 19. But if I see article 359, I can see the union executive discretion is available here, because the union executive, that is the council of ministers and the president, will decide which fundamental rights are to be included in the presidential proclamation, and their enforcement will be suspended. So this is how the article 358 and article 359 differentiate with respect to each other. So this was the series of one of the fundamental topics that are going, that there is a high probability of their appearance in the prelims 2024 examination. So we will also be taking such important topics, like your fundamental concepts get clear and you do make a higher chances of clearing the prelims 2024 examination. So we will be meeting in the next lecture with a new set of topic. Till then, keep revising and keep learning. Thank you.